Hello and welcome to Edusathi. In this lecture, we'll do the concept of ratio. So, ratio of two quantities, say A and B, is denoted by A ratio B and is measured as fraction A over B. So, if I'm comparing two quantities and I write one in the numerator, another in the denominator, that is what the ratio thing means. So if I consider A ratio B 2 is to 5, that means if I take A ratio B as 2 is to 5, A is 2 parts in compared to 5 parts of B. So I can write A as 2/5 of B. For every 5 parts of B, I have 2 parts of A. And similarly, I can write B as 5 by 2 of A. Or I can write B as 2.5 times of A. So here I am writing A as 0.4 times of B. That means A is only 40% of B, or A is 0.4 of B. Whereas B is 2.5 times A. I can also write it as 40%, and I can write there as 250% of A. B is 250% of A. Or in other words, I can say A is 60% less than that of B. So if I am taking my reference point to be B, A is 60% less than B and A is only 40% of B. Whereas if I take B in comparison to A, that means if I take my reference point as A, or if I take my base as A, I would say B is 150% more than A. So if I'm comparing it with A, B is 250% of A, or B is 150% more than A. The very important points that I need to remember when I'm doing the topic of ratio, first is the ratio that I've found out for A and B or whatever has to be of like quantities. I cannot take dissimilar quantities and find their ratio. That will be a wrong thing. So ratio has to always be of two similar quantities such that the units get cancelled out. The second thing that I need to remember is ratio is a relative measure. Ratio is not absolute value that I have. So if I was talking about A over B is in the ratio 2 is to 5. If A is 20, B is 50. If A is 200, B will be 500. But in all the cases, the ratio has to be maintained. So ratio does not give me absolute values of A and B. It only tells me the relative measure. How are they connected relatively? How is one in relation to another? Another thing that you need to keep in your mind is multiplying a ratio with same constant both in the numerator and in the denominator does not alter the ratio. So if you have some ratio A over B, if you multiply the numerator and denominator with the same constant, the numerical value of the ratio does not change. So if you have 2 by 3 and if I multiply it with 2 in the numerator and denominator, it becomes 4 by 6. Technically, 2 by 3 and 4 by 6 represent 1 as the same thing. Let's look at some of the questions related to the concept of ratio. If 55% of the people who purchased a certain product are female, what is the ratio of number of females who purchase the product to the number of males who purchase that product? So here, if I have to take a ratio, and the question is a kind of mixture of ratio and percentage, whenever I have percentage, percent means out of 100. So what I suppose is there are 100 people who buy a certain product, out of which 55%, which will actually be 55, are women. How many I'm left with? I'm left with 45. So obviously the leftover has to be men. So the question is asking me the ratio of number of females who buy the product to the number of males. Now the ratio is always in a simplified form. I can cut out the common factors. It will be 5 into 11. This will be 5 into 9. So my answer becomes 11 is to 9. That is the answer that I have to this question. Let's look at another question. Oil, vinegar and water are mixed in a 3:2:1 ratio to make salad dressing. If Larry has 8 cups of oil, 7 cups of vinegar and access to any amount of water, then what is the maximum number of cups of salad dressing that he can make with all the ingredients that he has available if fractional cup measurements are possible? So, this is the question that we have. Now, if I look at the question, oil is used 3 times in comparison to water, and oil and vinegar are in the ratio 3 is to 2. Or vinegar, or the quantity of oil, if you talk about, is 1.5 times of vinegar, and it is 3 times as compared to that of water. So if you look at it, the limiting factor is the oil because it is required in the greatest quantity. So what I'll look at is I'll try to use all oil. So if I'm using 8 cups of oil here, I would not require 7 cups of water because the water that is required is 2/3 of oil. So if I talk about water, water is 2/3 of oil. So this is the quantity of water that I require. Uh, I may not solve it as of now. Let me just keep it as such. Now, if I look about, sorry, not water, this should be vinegar. Now, if I talk about water, water is 1/3 of 8. So what I'll do is I'll just look at these things and I add 8 plus 8 into 2 by 3 plus 8 by 3. So if I just take the LCM and add up the things, I may get my answer. So if I just take an LCM, 3, 16 and 8, which is what, 24. So I have 8 plus this 8. My answer turns out to be 16. So I can take a maximum number of cups that I can make would be this much. Comparison of ratios. Now, how would I compare the two ratios? Now, look at a question which is there in front of me, and I'm asking you which of the following is incorrect. So, 3 of the following statements are correct, and probably one of them is incorrect. And my question is which of the following is incorrect. Now, if you have calculator, obviously you can just punch in the values in the calculator and get your answers very, very easily. However, if calculator is not available to you, one of the method of solving this out is this. So, what you have is I will try to multiply the things. So if you have A, B and C, D and you have to compare these two ratios, just try to cross multiply and find the product of AD and BC. Now if AD is greater than BC, then your original ratio AB is greater than CD. If AD is less than BC, that means your original ratio AB is less than the ratio CD. And if the product of AD is equal to BC, that means A over B is equal to B by C. That means the two ratios are equal. So this is an easier way of solving the question because actually multiplying the things is a lot more easier than actually dividing the things. So you can follow this rule to find out these questions. Once you follow this rule, you'll see answer number C is the one which is incorrect that we have in this question. Proportion. Now what do we understand by proportion? Quantities A, B, C, D, E, F are in proportion. That means the ratio of first two is equal to the ratio of next two is equal to the ratio of next two and so on. So if I find out the ratio of first two, the next two and so on, all the ratios turns out to be equal. So if ratios are equal, the numbers are in proportion. That is the thing that we have. So A here, the first quantity is known as the first proportion, second proportion, third proportion, fourth proportion and so on. An important point to note is the number of quantities in proportion should be even, and I require a minimum number of 4 quantities for the two ratios to be compared to each other. So here if A over B is equal to C by D, I'll say the numbers A, B, C, D are in proportion. So I need a minimum of 4 numbers and the number of quantities should be even. Let's look at a question related to proportion. Find a number x so that the ratio of x to 49. So I have a ratio of x to the number 49 is same. So that means the numbers are in proportion, as the ratio of 3 is to 21. Very simple question, just solve 3 sevens are 21. So I just get the value of 7 by 49 is equal to 1 by x, or x is equal to 7. That is the answer that I have for this question. So let me just erase the things on the slide. Yeah. Let's look at the next question. In a certain children's class, there is a 2 is to 3 ratio of boys is to girls. So I'll just write it. The number of boys and the number of girls are in the ratio 3 is to 2. So I can say the absolute number of boys and the absolute number of girls. This is the number of boys in the class. This is the number of girls in the class. So the total class size is 5x. The ratio of the students from the north side of the town to the students from the south side of the town is 4 is to 3. Now, this is the ratio of the student from the north and the south. If I have to write it in absolute value, I would write 4y and 3y. I would not use the same variable x, because x is a common variable which has been used when I was calculating the number of boys and girls. And I cannot use the same when I am calculating another ratio, because it is not necessary that the common factor should be same. So what will be the total number of students in the class? It will be 7y. Now look here and look here. Both the values represent the total number of students in the class. So what I can say is 5x has to be equal to 7. Why? Because this is also the total number of students and this is also the total number of students in the class. The smallest possible number of students in the classes. So either it is 5x or 7y. Now 5 and 7 have nothing in common. That means their HCF is coming out to be 1. So if these two things are equal, the value that x has to take is 7 and the y has to take is 5. So what is the minimum number? 5 into 7, there has to be a total of 35 students in the class. Or what you can do is you can take an LCM of 5 and 7. Why 5 and 7? The number of students in the class is a multiple of 5 and the number of students in the class is a multiple of 7. So the minimum number of students that are a multiple of both 5 and 7 is 35. Now let's look at the next concept of directly proportional and inversely proportional. Directly proportional. A is directly proportional to B. That means if B increases, A will also increase. If B decreases, A will also decrease. So A is directly affected by B. If B is increasing, A will also increase. If B is decreasing, A will also decrease. And the magnitude change is also the same. So I mean to say, if B becomes double of the original, A will also become double of the original. If B becomes 10 times of the original, A will also become 10 times of its original value. Now, to remove the sign of proportionality, we'll have to put a constant. So if I have to convert it into an equation, I'll write A is equal to BK. Now what is this? This is a constant. A constant remains constant under every situation. So what I can say is A over B, the ratio A over B will always be maintained as constant. So if you have two or more situations, the value of A1 over B1 will be equal to the value of A2 over B2 will be equal to A3 over B3, and all of them would be equal to a constant K. This is how we generate an equation for directly proportional. Let's look at an example. A is directly proportional to B. So I would say A is directly affected at B. If A is equal to 8 when B is equal to 2. When B was 2, A was 8. So I'll just put it in an equation. So I'll get the value of K. When B is 2, the question is, what is A when B is 4? So when B is 4, the value of A is what you have to find out. Now just look at it. B becomes double of the original. Even if I don't find out the value of K and do all that stuff, B becomes double of the original. A will also become double of the original. So A will become a value of 16. The second case that we have is inversely proportional. A is inversely proportional to B. That means if B increases, A will decrease. They are related in an inverse sense. If B decreases, A would increase. And the magnitude change would also be the same. That means if B becomes double, A would become half. If B reduces to one third, A will increase 3 times. So magnitude also become 1 over K times. And if I have to write it in an equation, I'll write it as A is equal to K by B. So if I just multiply, the product of A into B will always remain constant. So under different circumstances, A1, B1, the product of A1, B1 will be equal to the product of A2, B2 and so on. Let's look at a question. A is inversely proportional to B. If A is equal to 16 when B is equal to 1. So when B is equal to 1, A is 16. I'll just look at A is inversely proportional to B. Perfectly alright. What is B when A is 4? Now look at it. I can do it orally. A has reduced by 4 times. B will increase by 4 times. So my answer would be B is equal to 4. However, if you want to put in the formula, you can put in the formula and get your answer as well. Now let's understand the concept of average. Average refers to sum of all observations over number of observations. This average is also known as simple average or is also known as the mean value. So if I'm calculating mean or simple average or average, it is very simple. It is the sum of observations divided by the number of observations that we have. Let's look at an example. The average of 10 numbers is 16. What number should be added so that the average becomes 17? So if the average of 10 numbers is 16, I can assume all the numbers to be equal to 16. So all the 10 numbers can be assumed to be 16, 16, 16, 16, 16. So sum of all the numbers, if I just look at, would be 160. This is the sum. What number should be added so that the average becomes 70? So I have to add some. So that means if the number have increased, I'll also divide it with an increased number. Sorry, I will divide it with 11 because the number of numbers have increased from 10 to 11. Now what is the new average that I want? I want the new average to be 17. So I'll just cross multiply the things and I will get my answer. The answer that comes out to be is 27. Let's look at a question based upon average. Alan has received the following scores on 3 exams: 82, 74 and 90. What score will Alan need to receive on the next exam so that the average score for the 4 exams will be 85? I want an average score of 85. Now if I look at it, I know the formula for average. Average score is sum of all the observations. So these are the different observations that I have got divided by the number of observations that I have. So if I just follow the formula of average, which is a very simple formula, sum of observations over number of observations, that will probably give me my answer to this question. So I'm giving you half a minute to solve this calculation. I hope you've solved the calculation by now. So when you do 85 into 4 this side and you add up all these numbers on this side, 246 plus x. So the value of x turns out to be equal to 94. 94 marks I should get in the other exam so that the mean comes out to be equal to 85. Let's look at another question. The question is, if A, B, C, D are consecutive integers and A is less than B, less than C, less than D, what is the average of A, B, C and D in terms of D? Now whenever you have a question of this type, I would say, you assume the value. That is the most simplest thing that I have. 1, 2, 3 and 4. So if you talk about the average here, the average is the middle value. The average would come out to be 2.5. So I know the value of D is 4 and the value of average is 2.5. I can just look at my options and get the answer. Now if I look at it, 4 minus 2.5 is 1.5. This is not giving me the answer. 4 minus 2 is again 2, which is not my average. This is not giving me my answer. 4 minus 1.5 is giving me my answer. So that means option number C is the correct answer that I have. And anyways, fourth option cannot be the answer because my average has to be between the numbers. The average cannot be greater than the greatest number. Very important thing about averages. Average is always between the smallest and the largest value. Average is the middle, the kind of middle value, the kind of mean that you have. It cannot be greater than the largest or smaller than the smallest value. Now, the next concept is the concept of weighted average. Let's look at this. Let's just understand it with the help of an example. You have class 10th and you have, let me suppose, the weights or the marks that people have scored. There are two sections, 10A and 10B. There are 3 people in 10A and there are 5 people in 10B. So these are the marks that have been obtained by a student: 30, 40, 50, 40, 50, 60, 70 and 80. So if I find out the class average, that means what is the average of 10A? It will be the sum of observation divided by the number of observation, which is 40. And if I find out the average of 10B, it will be again the sum of observation divided by the number of observation, which comes out to be 60. But if I ask you, what is the average of the entire 10th class comprising of both the section 10A and 10B? Would you just take the average of 40 and 60? So average of whole class, if you take the average of 40 and 60, which comes out to be 50, is a wrong answer. Why this is wrong is the most important thing. Why? Because the number of people that are there in both the sections are not equal. So very important thing that I have to keep into mind when I'm doing a question of averages, the contribution of both the classes have to be equal in terms of the number of people. So if the number of people are not equal, I cannot take their averages and find again the simple average of that average to get to my answer. So I'll just follow the basic formula: sum of all the observation of the entire 10th class. This is 120 of 10A, 300 of 10B divided by the number of people. So 120 plus 300 over 3 is to 5. The answer comes out to be 52.5 and not 50. Very important concept of weighted average. So if you want to go with the formula of weighted average, I'm just writing down the formula for your reference. Average of the first class into number of people in the first class plus average of the second class into number of people of the second class plus average of the third into number of people. Basically, this is giving me the sum of all the observations. Sum of all the observations. If I add them up, this is sum of the observation of the entire class divided by the number of people that are there in both the classes. Let's look at the question related to weighted average. By weight, liquid A makes up 8% of the solution R and 18% of the solution S. If 3 grams of R are mixed with 7 grams of S, then liquid A accounts for what percentage of the weight of the resulting solution? So what do you have? You have two liquids. So if I look at it, liquid A, it makes 8% of solution R and 18% of solution S. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm taking 3 grams of this. So I'm taking 3 grams of this and I'm mixing 7 grams of this, right? Then liquid A accounts for what percentage of the weight in the resulting solution? I basically have to find out the average that I get. So now if I look here, the contributions are not equal. I'm not taking equal weights from from solutions R and S. I'm taking 3 grams and I'm taking 7 grams. So I cannot take a simple average of 8 and 18 and say that is my answer. If I take the simple average of 8 and 18, if I just do it for the simplicity purposes also, that comes out to be 30. Now contribution of S, 7 grams and 18% is more. So my answer would be greater than 13% because this 18% thing is contributing more. So my answer will move from a simple average of 13 to something on a higher side. This cannot be my answer, 13. Anything less than 13 cannot be my answer. It has to be more than 13. And 26 cannot be my answer and 19 cannot be my answer. So I don't even have to solve the question. Because if I'm mixing two things, the highest thing is 18. My average has to be below 18. It cannot be above 18. So these two quantities are above 18. And if I take a simple average, it is 13. So my weighted average cannot be 13. It has to be more than that. The only answer I'm left with is option number C. However, if you want to try, I can just apply the formula 3 into 8% plus 7 into 18% over 3 plus 7. So you just have to solve this thing out and you will get your answer. Right, so the answer that you are getting is 15%. Now let's look at the rule of alligation. Alligation is a rule that enables us to find the ratio in which two or more components with given characteristics. Now this given characteristics can be concentration, which is generally expressed in percentages, could be price or any other factor, must be mixed to obtain the mixture with desired characteristics. So alligation helps me finding the ratio in which the two components must be mixed to get to a desired mixture. The rule of alligation is if two components are mixed, then the quantity of cheaper over the quantity of dearer. Now this cheaper could be in terms of price, could be in terms of concentration. Over quantity of dearer, again, dearer means the thing which is higher in price or has a higher concentration is equal to dearer minus mean over mean minus cheaper. Now here this is the characteristic which could be the concentration or the price. The quantity of cheaper over dearer would be equal to dearer minus mean over mean minus cheaper. So it is written, it is actually derived from the weighted average only. If you remember your weighted average formula, this was the average of the first class into quantity, average, quantity, quantity, quantity. So if I just cross multiply the things with average, I get NA and NB multiplied on the left hand side, and I have the same thing on the right hand side. If I just adjust the terms with quantities, I get the alligation formula. So alligation is nothing but the weighted average formula adjusted to give you the ratio of the two components getting mixed. So what we generally do is we write down the cheaper one on the left hand side and the dearer one on the right hand side. This represents the characteristic, which could be your concentration or price. These arrows represent that these two things are getting mixed. Their quantities are Na and Nb, and when I'm mixing them, I'm getting some average thing which is Aw. So what I do is I find out the difference between AB and Aw and Aw and Aa. So that means I'm finding the difference between dearer minus mean over mean minus cheaper, and when I find their ratio, that gives me the ratio of the two components getting mixed. However, I cannot find the absolute values of the two components getting fixed unless one of them is given. I can only find out the ratio. Here Na and B represents the number of members, and A and B represents the average of the groups that I have. Thank you so much for watching the video. You can like us and subscribe to our YouTube channel at the links given below. You can follow us on Facebook for more updates and visit edusati.com to practice more questions on this topic. Now move on to part 6, which is the last part in arithmetic that we have. Thank you so much. Have a good day.